Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Tyler, and today I am going to be recapping the Orioles' sweep of the Minnesota Twins this week at Camden Yards. Dominant fashion in games 1 and 2, and then a nail biter in game 3 with Cedric Mullins hitting the first walk-off of his career. Pretty interesting stuff to talk about in game 3, which we'll get to in a few moments. But before that, a few news items I wanted to cover before we get into the games. And I'll also mention that if you're listening to this in audio format, that's great. You shouldn't be missing out on too much. But if you would like to see sort of the whole visual aspect of this, I would encourage you head over to YouTube, search us, the Warehouse Podcast, subscribe to us, but watch a few videos first just to get the idea. But what I'm going to be doing on YouTube is a screen share to kind of provide sort of visual accompaniment to this episode. I've got a little outline here I'll start with, and then I'll go through a few different images that'll help kind of explain sort of my perspective and point of view on the points I make. I feel like it helps me. It's sort of what I'm doing in the background when I'm recording these episodes anyway, and I thought it might be kind of helpful to put that out there in the YouTube feed. We'll try it out. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Feel free to give us some feedback either via email thewarehousepod@gmail.com, or you can comment on YouTube if you would like. But anyway, let's get into it. So today, the news items we're going to be talking about first, Tyler Wells heads to the IL. John Means is struggling in his rehab, and Kyle Bradish is looking good in his first rehab. Sort of a shocking rehab assignment for Bradish rather early, but we'll get into that. And then Tony Kemp, the guy who I think a lot of Birdland was unhappy to see make the opening day roster, understandably, then exited in a very classy way when Jackson Holliday was promoted. He has elected free agency and has signed with another team already. We'll get into that in just a minute. And then, of course, we will get to the games, give out awards, and preview what is up next for the Baltimore Orioles. So, first news item, Tyler Wells heads to the IL with elbow inflammation. So this didn't happen right after his most recent start. He had pitched, been on the bench for a couple of days, and then it was, the news kind of came out right before the game that Wells was going to go on the 15-day IL, which is going to be retroactive to April 13th. And he's got what the Orioles are calling elbow inflammation. Obviously, that is always sort of a little bit scary, kind of right up there with forearm tightness. When you talk about pitcher injuries, it's usually a precursor to some pretty nasty stuff that you don't want to have happening. The good news there is that Brandon Hyde is saying that it's sort of precautionary for Wells. He may be tightened up a little bit, or he's got a little bit of soreness there. They don't want to mess around with it, and you can kind of understand that right now in the light of a lot of pitcher injuries right now, significant pitcher injuries where players are getting Tommy John surgery and missing, a year and a half. We've seen with John Means, it's been essentially a 2-year recovery for him where he's, came back for a little bit last year. Still doesn't seem right now based on his numbers to this point, but we'll get into that momentarily. But Wells is the focus for the moment. And, Wells is a guy that in the previous 2 seasons, in the first half of the year, was very good for the Baltimore Orioles. He was arguably their best starter in the first half of each of the last 2 seasons. And coming into this season, I think prior to, prior to February 1st, when we learned about the Corbin Burns trade, or I'm sorry, not prior to that, but when we learned about the Corbin Burns trade, I think we kind of thought in our minds, okay, Burns is in. He's not going to lead the staff. John Means is said to be healthy. He's going to be, towards the middle or back of the staff. And that's our 5, along with, Kyle Bradish, Grayson Rodriguez, and Dean Kramer. That's our pretty strong 5. Tyler Wells will probably go back to pitching in the bullpen, which is what he did at the end of last season and looked really good while doing it. But then, of course, we hear Bradish has a slight tear in his UCL. We know John Means is still recovering somewhat from his Tommy John surgery. Obviously, he pitched a little bit last year, had good numbers on the surface, but some peripherals that were a little bit scary. They intentionally held him back a little bit. So now you were down to 3 pitchers, and then it became kind of evident as spring training went on that Tyler Wells and Cole Irvin were going to step in to that spot. And I think, and Wells was really good in the spring. He was arguably the Orioles' best pitcher in the spring. And I think not too many of us were worried about Tyler Wells, at least early on. We know he's had some issues with maintaining stamina throughout a long season. But in general, he's been really good in the first half of the year. So I think, it didn't feel too bad to say, okay, Wells will step in for the first month or two while Bradish and Means recover. We'll feel pretty good about that. He'll get us through some tough games, and we'll kind of go from there. But Wells has not pitched very well so far. Through 3 starts, he's pitched just 15 and a third. So he's averaging a little over 5 innings an outing, which is fine. But his Ks per nine are down pretty far, below 8 Ks per nine, which is not fantastic. He's not a guy that, when he starts, really does rack up the strikeouts. If you look back in 2021, when he was exclusively a reliever, his K per nine was up above 10, and he was walking fewer than 2 per nine. Those numbers have both regressed a little bit as a starter, but that's sort of understandable. You're not going to be throwing all out every single time. You become a little bit less difficult to hit in individual circumstances, but you can get through a lineup multiple times because Wells does have several pitches that he can throw, but it just hasn't really been working for him so far this year. He's, again, an issue for him has been home runs. He's giving up, one or two pretty much every time he starts, which just is not going to work, and that's led him to a 5.87 ERA. And that's a little bit better actually than his expected ERA, which is 7.23. And if you move over to like his baseball savant page, it's not super pretty. Like, he is getting a lot of chases. He's getting an average number of whiffs, but he's not getting those strikeouts, like I said, although he is avoiding walks really well, which he's typically been a guy that does not walk a lot of guys. You have to earn your way on to the bases, but fastball velo doesn't look great. He's giving up some hard contact, like I said, too many home runs, and it's just not been a good time for him. So I kind of, you don't want to assume the Orioles are doing anything nefarious, because I don't know that there's any evidence of that. I'm sure he has some legitimate issues he's dealing with, but he hasn't pitched very well. This does create an opening for the Orioles in the rotation, not exactly at an advantageous time, because the options for them to start games with Wells out are not evident. Now, we're going to learn here in game 3, they might have found a gem in Albert Suarez, but I think going into this, they didn't exactly know that for sure. And, to go without Wells is makes this team, I think, worse in the moment, but it could be a good time for Wells to kind of step back, reset a little bit. And what it's going to do is, it's going to, when he comes back in 2 weeks, it should coincide with John Means coming back, uh, theoretically. And then that gives the Orioles some options in the pitching situation. Is Wells going to come back and start again, or are they going to do the thing where they say, all right, Tyler, let's pull back, and then let's come back, maybe take a rehab outing at Bowie or whatever, and only throw 2 innings. Like, they might bring him back as a multi-inning kind of guy, which they don't really have in the bullpen right now. They don't have a multi-inning option. I guess Keegan Aiken is kind of close to that, in that he used to be a starter relatively recently, and he has thrown multiple innings before, but they've largely used him in a 1 inning capacity. Same can be said for Danny Coulomb. He sometimes will span multiple innings. Yennier Cano will span multiple innings, but I think ideally Brandon Hyde wants to keep those guys to 1 inning each. So I wonder if Tyler Wells could come back in a multi-inning situation or role, or could maybe they say, hey, John Means, it's just really not working for you right now in the minors. Let's try you in a multi-inning relief situation. I think it's an interesting setup we've got right now, where those two are kind of going to be on a collision course in terms of coming back. Which that kind of leads us to the John Means point, but I'll wrap up Tyler Wells here just to say that hasn't pitched very well. Fortunately, the Orioles are saying it's a precautionary thing, so it doesn't sound like this is like the beginnings of Tommy John surgery coming. It doesn't sound as inevitable as like that forearm tightness, or that we're shutting him down type of thing, like Garrett Cole had back in the spring. It doesn't sound that serious. It sounds more like maybe he's just not quite feeling it right now. And we know he struggled with stamina before. And let's get ahead of that this time and just say, all right, Tyler, when you're feeling it, let's sit you down. This is what the IL is for. Maybe you're never going to be that 200 inning horse. That's fine. If we can get 80 to 100 good innings out of you when you're healthy, and span the entire season, rather than you needing to shut things down in August every year, let's do that. Let's take some IL stints. Let's take 1 or 2 IL stints throughout the summer and make you last a little bit longer. I think that's smart from both the player's perspective and from the Orioles' perspective. So hopefully he comes back, and it'll just be interesting to see what his role will be like when he does come back. Now, as I said, that kind of rolls us into the John Means situation, which is, as we know, John Means had Tommy John surgery about 2 years ago, came back late last year, pitched out of the rotation for the Orioles. The numbers were good, but the peripherals were a little bit worrying. He wasn't really striking anybody out. He was giving up some contact. Didn't pitch in the playoffs for the Orioles because he was having some residual effects from getting back and getting healthy. Then we heard he was healthy this offseason. That turned out to not exactly be true because then we learned shortly into spring training, or maybe the first day, I guess, when pitchers and catchers reported that he's going to start the season on the AL because the Orioles have intentionally slow played him throughout the offseason. And now we're hearing he's about a month behind everybody. So that would put him at coming back in late April, which currently is sort of the trajectory for him. And Mike Elias even came out and talked to the press last week and said that that's still kind of the trend line is late April, early May. And if it is May, it's going to be very shortly into May. So all indications are that John Means is going to be back with the Orioles relatively soon. I'm recording this on April 19th, a little bit behind on the recording. He's going to be back relatively soon. So the Orioles have some decisions to make there as far as Wells and Means are concerned. I don't think that you're going to keep either one of them out of the big league picture because they have a track record of being very good in the major leagues. And with all the epidemics of injuries, there's just not a ton of quality MLB pitchers just lying around. And if you have one in your organization, you're likely going to have him on your big league staff. So I think when they both are healthy, they're both going to be on the big league team. It's just a matter of what the roles are going to be because I can't see both of them going into the rotation necessarily because right now, and we'll get to this in game 3, Albert Suarez just played really well. I think you got to give him at least one more turn, right? And if he pitches well again, you're not exactly going to take him out. Cole Irvin is giving you kind of exactly what you need right now, which is not super exciting. But if he can go through the order twice and the Orioles are still in the game, that's better than a potential alternative of blowing things up in the first or second inning, which is kind of what the risk feels like for John Means right now. So let's get into what John Means' rehab has looked like to this point. Back on March 31st is when he started his rehab. And just as a reminder, rehab assignments for pitchers can only last 30 days. So he can only pitch in the minors through April 30th or April 29th. So anything beyond that would be an issue, and we should be very concerned. Maybe we should be concerned anyway. But that's the absolute last day he can pitch in the Orioles minor league system. So that's something to be mindful of. So he started on March 31st with the Tides. All of his outings have been with the Tides at the AAA level. In a 1-inning outing against Durham, he allowed 7 earned runs on 6 hits, including 2 home runs, a walk, and 2 strikeouts. I believe people have commented on this outing saying that the pitch mix was a little bit weird. I think he was throwing a lot of fastballs, wasn't exactly trying to get hitters out as much as just get into a game, get into live action, feel your heart go up, your heart rate go up a little bit, all the kind of things you need to get into game shape rather than spring training shape. It's a different element. So that one people haven't worried about too much because it was one, his first start back, and 2, the pitch mix was a little bit weird. Then you get into April, and his next 2 starts are better. He goes 3 innings in each of those 2 starts. In the first start, he allows 1 run on 1 hit and 1 walk, and he strikes out 4. So I think you would take that, obviously. 1 run through 3 innings is pretty good. That makes a 3 ERA, and it also projects out to 12 strikeouts per 9. That's a good outing. Even at the AAA level, that's a good outing. Next outing, and again, 3 innings, gives up 2 runs on 2 hits, 1 home run, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts. This one's a little bit more worrying, right? Because again, it's a home run popping up. So he'd allowed 2 home runs in the first outing, another home run here, 2 runs over 3 innings. Although it's only 1 more run, not as good. 2 walks, fewer strikeouts, not getting as many whiffs there. Again, not a disastrous start by any means. 2 runs in 3 innings. You see guys do that all the time. Bounce back and have fine, 5 or 6 inning outings. But again, not as ideal as you'd want. And then this most recent outing on the 17th of April was a disaster. He lasts only 1/3 of an inning, gives up 5 runs on 5 hits, 2 home runs, 1 walk, and doesn't strike anybody out. Obviously, didn't have too many opportunities to strike people out, only got 1 out. This one, I did take a look at the pitch mix there. Again, it looked pretty normal. He was starting with fastballs early, but then got into his changeup, threw some curveballs. He was kind of throwing the kitchen sink out there, and it just was not happening for him. His velocity looked fine. I think he was sitting 92, which is about what John Means is at this point, especially in a starter's role. I think with John Means, what I tend to look at with him the most is fastball changeup, especially to those righties. He really neutralizes guys. That's kind of how he burst onto the scene as a reliever against the Yankees a couple years ago, was making them look like absolutely silly with that changeup of his, and it's still a really good pitch, or at least it was as recently as last year. But right now, doesn't seem like it's getting a lot of whiffs. Um, Now, I don't have any big explanation for why that is, but it just has not been good right now. And let's slow down a little bit and say that you can't judge the scouting. You can't scout based on the box score all the time, of course, right? We're not looking at, you know, exit velocities. We're not looking at pitch shape. We're not looking at all those things. I've seen velocity, that looks about normal. And, hits that are hits in AAA might not be hits in the big leagues. That's a factor as well. But the 2 home runs, that's not good. That's worrying. Um, because those are going to be home runs in the big leagues too. The dimensions are not that different in the minors versus the big leagues, so that's worrying. And he's now allowed 5 home runs in only what 7 1/3 innings. That's just not going to cut it. So that's very concerning as well. And of course, no strikeouts, but again, it was just sort of a disaster of an outing. And his ERA on the year now for the Tides is 18.41, 9 strikeouts in 7 1/3 innings, and a whip of 2.59. So not going to freak out again. Of course, he's probably got two more. He could have 2 more starts with the Tides, and he could look a lot better if he goes 3 innings. This next start allows 1 run, and then goes 4 innings, allows 1 run, strikes out 5, then you're not worrying about it too much. But right now, certainly concerning. But like I said, he's got until the end of April essentially for this rehab assignment. I feel like the Orioles are going to take all that time based on that outing. If he had been dominant on that day, I could have said, hey, let's just get him up here now. He looks ready, but he does not look ready right now. And I would be very concerned. And again, I think with him and Wells kind of now on a collision course a little bit for late April, the Orioles can kind of say, who do we want in the bullpen? Who do we want in the rotation? Like I said, I don't think you want 2 guys coming back from injury in the rotation at the same time, even if they are veterans that have done it before. I think you got to make a decision there. So that's the latest on John Means' rehab. On the opposite side of things is Kyle Bradish's rehab, which has been, I mean, he's made 1 start, but it was one really good start. So he pitched on April 16th for Bowie against Altoona, went 3 innings, allowed just 1 hit, struck out 4, no runs. Opponent batting average of 100, so they went 1 for 10 against him. That's as good as you could hope for from Bradish. I'd have to look at some of these velo numbers, and again, velocity numbers on these aren't always as reliable as and yeah, they don't even have it on here. You can't even look at velo numbers on. Oh yeah, you can. 1 second. Let's look here. So in the first inning, oh, they don't have velo numbers at all. Yeah, that's like kind of the problem with minor league stuff is AAA. There's a little bit of numbers you can look at and make some determinations, but below that, it's very hit or miss and a lot of times miss. So, but in general, the numbers are good. The strikeout numbers are encouraging, even at a AA level, and it's hard to not be excited about that output for Kyle Bradish. And it feels like he's really healthy. It's the Orioles need him. Just they need him because he's a Cy Young contender. He was last year, and any team that you can, or anytime you can add that kind of a guy back to your team, you do it. But I'm just shocked at how fast he's coming along. It's a guy that I think Tommy John surgery was probably on the table when they found out about his injury. I know they aren't going to say that, but you have a UCL tear, even if it's minor. I think there's always that option. They've not gone that route. They've rehabbed. All the talk about him has been very positive, and I'm shocked that he has started his rehab this soon, April 16th. Again, they can only go 30 days. There are some extenuating circumstances there. We saw that last year with Dylan Tate, how he had a rehab assignment. It ended and he did not come back. He went back on the IL and then ended up missing the whole year. Michael Givens had a similar situation. Um, Bradish is on the way back and he's already thrown 3 innings. And let's see, that was a total of pitches. I'm trying to see if they have the pitches here. They do. 44 pitches, 26 of which were strikes. So that split isn't like great. That's actually kind of a lot of balls. 18 balls, 26 strike. I think that's not a perfect mix there, but you don't want to be in the strike zone too much either. So could be a lot of chasing there from the eager AA hitters with the Altoona curve. But in general, good to see that he's back. The Orioles could use him. And yeah, all good things there. Not much to analyze if we don't have, the velocity stats that I was talking about. And then let's just talk on Tony Kemp real quick. So Tony Kemp, not a lot to add here. Obviously, wasn't an Oriole for very long. What, 2.5 weeks. Was DFA'd when the Orioles called up Holiday. And now he is going to be with the Minnesota Twins, the team the Orioles just swept. He has signed on with the Twins on a minor league deal, and he's going to be heading to their AAA St. Paul affiliate. Maybe he'll be up at some point, but not today. So, you have to, I assume he went to Minnesota and got a better deal in terms of, being on the minor league team, or at least, he got his $1 million with the Orioles. He can go get, a good chunk of change with the Twins and maybe make close to the league minimum while being sort of a depth option for them in the minors. So I have nothing but admiration for Kemp. He came here, did his work for 2 weeks, obviously didn't play very well, but seemed like a nice guy. Everything that people have said about him is that he's like a consummate professional, good clubhouse guy, and nothing negative to say. So I hope he has a really good stay with the Twins. Hopefully he gets back up to the big leagues, shows people what he can do. And yeah, best of luck to you, Tony. Just wanted to make sure we mentioned that on the pod. Now let's get into the games. First, game one. So we'll go through this kind of just like we normally do, go through the game, get into some analysis. So game one, O's get off to a flying start on Jackie Robinson Day as Cedric Mullins steals a certain double away from Kyle Farmer in the top of the first inning. That would be a harbinger of good things to come for the Orioles center fielder in this series. Then in the bottom of the frame, Jordan Westburg puts the good guys ahead with a 2-out double to score the Ryans, O'Hearn, and Mountcastle. Minnesota claws one run back in the top of the second with a solo shot from Jose Miranda, returning to the park where he made his MLB debut just 2 years ago. More scoring in the O's half of the third when O'Hearn launches his third home run of the season, a solo shot to make it 3-1. Then it's Mullins again hitting a long fly ball to center field, which ends up as a sacrifice fly to bring home Mountcastle, who had singled earlier in the frame. Miranda continues to be the bulk of the Twins' offense in the fourth as he singles home Byron Buxton to trim the Orioles' lead to 2 runs. But Mullins didn't like that too much as he smacks a 2-run bomb in the fifth inning to push the Orioles' lead to 6-2. And then Gunnar Henderson puts the finishing touches on the home team scoring for the day with a solo bomb to begin the sixth inning. The visitors would claw back a pair in the top of the seventh inning on a Ryan Jeffers double to bring home Austin Martin and Edouard Julien, but they would get no closer. Yenier Cano got back on track to work a scoreless eighth and then hand the ball to Craig Kimbrell. The O's closer struck out a pair en route to his 4th save of the season. So, probably the best start of Cole Irvin's season so far. You can see the line here on YouTube. Went 4 2/3, not fantastic, but got 2 runs on 6 hits, no walks, which is very important for Irvin, 4 strikeouts, just the 1 home run. Was getting hit pretty hard in that first inning, not going to lie. And that catch that Cedric Mullins made was ridiculous in center field. I don't know how he made the catch. I think the expected batting average on it was like 4 something, which I'm sure it felt way higher. It felt like a 900 type of, expected batting average. I don't know how Mullins got to it, but Irvin was the beneficiary. And I think what's interesting to note on the Irvin outing is that Brandon Hyde did not allow him to face the middle of the Twins order a third time. I think he ended up finishing against Margot or Kirilloff or something like that. And then they pulled him out for the middle of the order, which I think is exactly what you need from a Cole Irvin start, right? This is a guy that does not have, wipeout stuff, despite what we saw in the spring with the increased velocity. It hasn't translated to, this guy that's going to blow away opposing teams. It's just not his deal. But what is his deal is, playing to contact, hopefully playing to, relatively light contact. That wasn't really the case here. But also, no walks, not giving anybody free passes. You can't both give up free base runners and hard contact. You kind of need to pick one. And you see a lot of guys that have like really big velocities, but pitch in the middle of the plate because they have that room for error there. When they get hit, they'll get hit really hard, but they're also striking out, 7 guys over 5 innings and throwing 97 miles an hour, and they can deal with that. Irvin's a guy that's throwing more 91, 92. You don't have that wiggle room. And on Baseball Savant here, I'm looking, he only got 3 whiffs on 37 swings. That is not good. That's an 8% whiff rate, which is abysmal. That is most of the time going to get you killed. So again, not a phenomenal start by any means, but as far as Cole Irvin is concerned, exactly what you want. Get us through the order 2 times, keep us in the game. Yeah, get a little help from your incredible defender in center field, but just don't blow the game. Don't make us have to use the bullpen in the second inning. Just survive, endure, and get us to the bullpen, which is exactly what he did there. And the bullpen here was Dylan Tate for 1 1/3. Keegan Aiken had some issues in his third of an inning. Yenier Cano 1 2/3, and then Craig Kimbrell again looks really good with his perfect inning in the ninth. 2 strikeouts to get his 4th save. I also want to talk about Colton Cowser here real quick. 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. This was the same day he got named AL Player of the Week for that previous week where he went crazy in Boston and then back home against Milwaukee. Takes an 0 for 4, which is I think important. It's this is a guy that really struggled last year in the big leagues, has come back and been, really dynamic this year, very important to the Orioles' early success. Gets an award and then takes a big lump here going 0 for 4. I think if this with 4 strikeouts, not just a normal 0 for 4. I think if this happens last year, it's demoralizing, right? Because you're already hitting 120 or whatever, and then you go 0 for 4, and now you're hitting 080 or whatever it is. That's super demoralizing. And it's like I just can't even do anything right. But Colton Cowser has now tasted some success after, really struggling. And this is sort of the ebbs and flows of baseball. You're gonna have some low lows and some high highs, and you can't get too much of either one. He took one on the chin here, 0 for 4, and then it would be important to see how he would bounce back throughout the rest of the series, which he did, which we'll get into here in just a minute. And then the top 4 hitters in the lineup, Henderson, Rutschman, O'Hearn, and Mountcastle, combined to go 8 for 17 with 5 runs score. And there was no Santander in this lineup, which is interesting. He had been struggling coming into this game. I think his batting average was right around 200, maybe a little bit below. He'd been hitting some home runs, but that's about it. Hadn't really been getting on base. He's like walking not at all. Santander's walking like 2 or 3% of the time. It's not been good so far. But what's important is the Orioles have so much depth here. Obviously, Austin Hayes has struggled as well, but the fact that you have a guy like Hayes who is an all-star, you can plug him into the lineup and feel pretty good about it. You've got Colton Cowser playing great. You can plug him in and feel pretty good about it. O'Hearn is crushing the ball right now as the DH. And when you take Santander off, obviously you're losing something, but given that he's struggling so much in the moment, you're probably not losing a whole lot. You still feel really good. And this team still scores 7 runs without arguably, historically, one of their most important hitters, Santander, taking a breather. This lineup is just so deep right now and can absorb slumps and hopefully, hopefully not, but can absorb injuries too. Like that's a very important part of this team having success is the ability to kind of absorb a day off for a Rutschman or a Henderson too. Like it can't all be on one guy every single day. So I think that was a really important part as well. And then speaking of which, Jordan Westberg, 3 for 4 in this game. Every time, everything he does kind of goes under the radar. I feel like I don't know why that is. I'll say personally, like I've never been, and this is me. This is not from me like watching Jordan Westberg as a prospect and coming to some sort of conclusion, right? It's, I learn based on what scouting outlets tell me, right? Which is that Jordan Westberg coming up was a good prospect. He was a back of the top 100 type of prospect who was going to make the big leagues, probably going to have a very good long big league career, but he's not of the ilk of Henderson, Rutschman, Holiday nowadays, not even maybe Kerstad or Mayo coming up. Like he wasn't that type of a prospect, but he's going to be very good. So my view of Jordan Westbrook for a long time has been that he's going to be that. He's going to be fine. He's going to be productive, but he's not going to be the heart of the order type of guy. And maybe that will still be true. I don't know. But right now he's like crushing the ball. And through this game, he had a 920 OPS. I think it might even get better throughout the series. We'll look at that here in just a second. But just unreal. Just unreal how well he's playing. And he's also showing some speed on the bases. I don't think he's stealing a whole lot. I'd have to look at that. But he's showing some speed on the bases. He's playing solid defense. Like just really, really spectacular stuff so far. Hitting the ball really hard, so there's not really like some too much smoke in these numbers. Like this is Jordan Westburg, and it's been great to see. And like I'll say with a lot of these players, he's not going to play this well all the time. He's going to have a bad week, and you know what? That's okay because the Orioles have this deep lineup right now that maybe they'll all slump at one point together, but in general, I think this is why, and I'll say this and it'll probably jinx it. This is why the Orioles have been able to avoid the sweeps for almost 2 years now. Is that the lineup's just deep, man. There's no breaks. Yeah, maybe Henderson's gonna have a bad week, but then Rutschman's probably hitting. And when Rutschman's having a bad week, Mountcastle's gonna just start hitting like crazy out of nowhere. And now you've got a guy like Jordan Westbrook hitting sixth in this game, but there's been games he hits eighth in the order. And it's just like it's like crazy, man. It's unsustainable for a pitcher to get through this order several times most of the time. And it's just really impressive. All right, let's go to game two in which the Orioles just absolutely wallop the Minnesota Twins 11-3. So the O's offense got to work early and often in this one, scoring 3 in the second and 4 in the third for an early 7-0 lead. And here's how that went down. James McCann started behind the dish and was the one who got the Orioles on the board first. His second inning double scores Colton Cowser, and then Gunnar Henderson sends McCann himself home with a long ball to make it 3-0. Cowser drove in the fourth run of the day, then RBI grounder to score O'Hearn, and Jordan Westbrook followed with a 2-run shot to push it to 6-0. Jackson Holliday worked his first career walk and would score a few batters later on a Henderson single. And then Minnesota finally got to O starter Grayson Rodriguez in the fourth when Byron Buxton tripled to center field, driving in Alex Kirilloff. Cowser took that run right back in the bottom of the inning with an RBI single to bring home Santander. The next scoring was done by the Twins in the sixth inning. A Kirilloff base hit drove in Jeffers to make it 8-2. The Orioles came right back in the bottom of the frame and did some scoring of their own. Ryan O'Hearn nearly smacked a 2-run homer, but was robbed by Buxton in center. He did manage to advance Adley Rutschman a base on the flyout, where he was perfectly positioned to score on an Anthony Santander single moments later. O'Hearn did get his home run in the eighth, however. He powered a 2-run bomb just beyond Buxton's reach in right center field, and that play was reviewed as a fan reached for the ball, but it was well out of the field of play at that point, and the call was correctly upheld. Minnesota scored a garbage time run in the ninth on a Jose Miranda single, but the Orioles still wrapped up the 11-3 win with little incident, a dominant performance from the good guys. So I think obviously all the scoring gets the headlines here and deservedly so. 11 runs, really good against Chris Paddock, who has had really good stuff, was a good prospect coming up, hasn't had as much success in the big leagues, I think, as a lot of people expected him to. But 11 runs, fantastic. But a lot of that is going to be me reiterating sort of what I talked about in game one. But I will say real quick, Ryan O'Hearn, absolutely insane game here. Let me see if I can kind of isolate him on this one. I'm trying to see exit velocities and then O'Hearn here on yeah. So if you look at these exit velocities, they're just ridiculous, right? So he had 5 balls put in play on the game. 4 of them were at 101.9 miles per hour or faster, which is just ridiculous. I think it's 95 miles per hour or more is hard contact. So this is really hard contact. You can see here, this top one is the one that actually got out, which was a home run in 14 of 30 ballparks. And then the one that got caught by Buxton was a home run in 16 of 30 ballparks. Camden Yards, not one of them, but that was tied for his hardest hit ball of the game. So despite him hitting 4 balls pretty hard, four really hard, only 2 hits. So, that's kind of the injustice of baseball, where his expected batting averages were all, apart from that line out at 90 miles per hour, they were all at 630 or better. His home run was actually the lowest expected batting average of any of his hits there, of his contact there at 630. That flyout was 880. Single he had earlier was 740, and then a line out in the first inning was expected batting average of 760. Just a ridiculous game for O'Hearn. He had a home run for the 3rd straight game. And I think, like, me personally, I'm somebody who was thinking that O'Hearn's was going to, kind of get smacked in the face by regression this season. He started off really well last year and then kind of fell apart towards the end of the season. I know a lot of people will say there was a lot of bad luck in there and a lot of the Orioles hitters were struggling at the same time. So there could be some sort of like contagiousness there. But, it's a guy with limited track record, really struggled with the Royals, kind of came out of nowhere to be an impact bat while Ryan Mountcastle was dealing with vertigo last year and the Orioles hung on to him. played really well, and right now he's like a fixture in the lineup, and I don't know what the Orioles would do without him. It wouldn't be nearly as deep. Yes, you'd probably be able to get Santander more at bats at first base and DH, and then that would open up right field for maybe a Heston Kjerstad to come up, and that would be great. But I can't think that Heston Kjerstad's going to come up right now and hit as well as Ryan O'Hearn is in this moment. And it's just really ridiculous. Another great performance from him. And it's another element of like Brandon Hyde kind of putting guys in positions to succeed. And that's not just Hyde, that's the front office with roster construction as well. But O'Hearn's pretty much exclusively facing right-handed pitching, and most of the league is right-handed pitching, so that's perfectly fine. And the results speak for themselves. So keep on doing what you're doing, and yeah, just really impressive from him. The other player I want to talk about is going to be Grayson Rodriguez. So here his line, you can see 6 innings, 2 runs on 4 hits, 3 walks, and 6 strikeouts. Not an otherworldly line or anything, but it's just sort of like become the consistency for him. He's won every single one of his starts this year. It's only 3 starts, but he's won all 3 of them. ERA at 2.63. He let's look at his baseball savant stuff here as far as the game is concerned. So you can see fastball had an average of 96.6 miles per hour. So a little bit of an added oomph there. His year average is 96.2. He had 12 whiffs on 42 swings, which is a whiff rate of almost 30%. Really, really good there. And that changeup was particularly good. 6 whiffs on 13 swings, a 46% whiff rate. Just like, I don't know, man, just really good. I think last time I recorded was that Pirates series, and the guy just looks like a dude. He pitches like an ace, and every single time out, I feel like the Orioles are going to win the game, and that's how I feel with him on the mound. It's how I feel with Burns on the mound. It's how I feel when Bradish was on the mound last year, and just like there's something there when you got 3 guys that could potentially be aces on other staffs. That's powerful, and that feels like a World Series contender, and that feels like a World Series winner. And I don't want to say, there's a long way to go between now and there, and there's a rehab stint for Kyle Bradish to get through, and then the likely coddling that's going to take place there because you can't run him into the ground. You need him there all season long. So we're going to see what the Orioles do there. But Rodriguez just really impressive again. And I wanted to mention this article from Eno Saris at The Athletic. I don't want to, I know people pay for this. I pay for this. So I don't want to share too much, but he ranks pitchers in the MLB rather. I'm sorry. People get very triggered online if you say the MLB. In Major League Baseball, MLB, he ranks these pitchers based on a number of factors, including fastball velocity, stuff plus, and then strikeout minus walk rate. So he's got these guys, and I think it's interesting to note where the prominent Orioles feature here. So Corbin Burns is up to number 1. He has Corbin Burns as the nastiest pitcher essentially. I'm not going to say best pitcher because there's other elements to it, but in terms of like what Saris is looking at, it's basically like nastiness. Corbin Burns he's got at number 1. Then if you scroll down to number 6, he's got Grayson Rodriguez. The Orioles have, in Saris's estimation, 2 of the 6 nastiest pitchers in baseball. And I'll just read his little quip on Rodriguez here. And he says, like with his teammate Burns, you can expect Rodriguez to beat his ERA projection. He now has 2 fastballs and 2 secondaries that are elite in terms of physical characteristics, so it's a full arsenal. Even using last year's data to improve the sample size, he's shown above average command of 4 pitches too. The only question mark is the fact that he lacks a slider. The cutter isn't great. Overuse of that pitch early last season is what got him in trouble, and he hasn't consistently thrown a hard breaking ball, but otherwise, he's golden Grayson. So really, really interesting stuff there. We know since he got back from his promotion last year, he was phenomenal. He has continued to be phenomenal now. The only blip between now and then was his start in the playoffs just wasn't very good. But a rookie making his first career playoff start in front of a home crowd, I think that can be forgiven. And just wow, just really amazing for Rodriguez so far. And then while we're here, I just do want to skim down a little bit farther. There is one more name on here, Kyle Bradish at number 34, and they don't have any blurb on him. Saris does talk about in the piece how guys that are injured move up, and he essentially has Bradish moving from 66th to 34th simply because he's getting closer to getting healthy. And obviously, once he pitches, he's going to have some numbers for this year that you can then base these projections on or these rankings on. And you know, the Orioles have 3 of the top 34 pitchers in Saris's estimation right now. Once Bradish pitches, where is he going to rank? He had him at 5th at the end of 2023. So if you think he's 5th, that bumps Grayson down to 7th. The Orioles have 3 of the top 7 guys in terms of like nastiness in baseball. I don't know how you deal with that in a postseason series. Obviously, Bradish and Rodriguez were in the same rotation in the postseason last year. I thought Bradish pitched pretty well against the Rangers, Rodriguez less so, but they're both a year older, mature, more mature. They have a guy like Burns who's been there, done that, hungry for a World Series that he's never gotten. I don't know, man. Pretty nasty, provided they all stay healthy, but interesting stuff to be sure. All right, let's get into game 3. With Tyler Wells on the shelf, the O's had to dig into the minors for a spot start, and they went with Albert Suarez, a pitcher that stole headlines for a brief time this past spring due to his lengthy time spent in Asia and the huge velocity he showed against the Phillies in a spring start. But despite all those good vibes, he struggled later in the spring and ultimately did not make the team. The Orioles probably hoped for one solid time through the order here, but instead they got 5 2/3 scoreless innings. His fastball averaged 95.5 miles per hour, nearly touched 98 miles per hour on one occasion, and it was dicing up the Minnesota lineup. The pitch had a 41% whiff rate, getting 11 whiffs on 27 swings. It would have been a good outing for anyone, but this was a player pitching in the majors for the first time in 6 years and starting a game at that level for the first time in 8 years. Credit is due to him for never giving up, continuing to work, and getting back to this point, and also to the Orioles pro scouts who identified him and signed him late last year and clearly got him into the lab. Is he a future ace of the staff? No, probably not. But he did help them win an MLB game. He could be a rotation factor for the rest of the year. And at the very least, the Orioles have to consider him for the bullpen if they do opt for someone else in the rotation as others hopefully get healthy. On offense, there was relatively little to talk about for the Orioles. Henderson led off the game with a home run, and then the bats went silent against a really good pitcher in Pablo Lopez. Neither team scored again until the 2 starters were on the bench. The Twins scored twice in the top of the 7th. Austin Martin singled in Manuel Margot, and then he scored himself on a Kyle Farmer base knock to give the Twins their first lead of the day. The O's came right back in the bottom of the frame when Santander took reliever Steven Okert deep to tie the game at 2 apiece. And then Craig Kimbrell came on for the 9th just to keep the game tied and give the O's a shot to win in the bottom of the frame. He did just that, going 1-2-3, and then Cedric Mullins sent the crowd home happy with a 2-run walk-off bomb onto the flag court for a 4-2 Orioles win. Again, I think I mentioned the top, Cedric Mullins, his first career walk-off. Kind of shocking that a guy with a fairly accomplished career to this point has not walked off a game just yet, although I guess those are somewhat a matter of chance, though. But Orioles clinched the sweep, moved to 12-6 on the year, and as of this recording, just a half game behind the New York Yankees for first place in the AL East, which is, interesting. I know people talk about the Yankees the most because they are, arguably the most famous baseball team in the world, kind of right there with the Dodgers, I feel like. But the Orioles, man, right there with them and threatening to leapfrog them here in the next couple of days. So, analysis. I think we got to start with Albert Suarez, right? I mean, I kind of said a lot there in the little recap. We can look at it here on Baseball Savant. As I said, the four-seamer averaged 95.9. The last time he was in the big leagues, which I was a long time ago, averaging 93.5 up to, averaging 96 is just insane. And he maxed out at almost 98 miles per hour. And then got 11 whiffs on 27 swings. Just like, I mean, that's an elite pitch right there. I don't know if the Twins weren't expecting it or what, but it was multiple times through the order. Didn't matter how many times they saw him. They just really couldn't do much with it. Then he shows really good like game awareness, right? And nothing's too big for him. He's an older player. He's been around the block a little bit, but hadn't been in the big leagues in a bit. Has that moment in I think the 5th inning where there's a runner on second. The ball gets hit kind of to the left side of the mound. The runner from second breaks towards third. Suarez picks it up, chucks it to third. Westberg's covering and just tags him out like nothing. It was maybe it was the 6th inning because then he got pulled out after that. But just game awareness stuff. Just awesome all around how good Albert Suarez was. And I can't really say much else than that. I think he certainly earned another trip through the rotation. Not that that was really any threat if he pitched well, because Tyler Wells is on the IL for a bit longer. John Means is still recovering. There was nobody else to really obviously come up. I think, you're kind of dreaming right now if you think like a Cade Povich is quite ready. Suarez is the guy for the next time through. And, this could all disappear. He could come in and not be throwing quite as hard as he was in this game. But man, he looked magical. And I think the Orioles have found something here. I like I said, I don't know that he's going to be a future ace of the staff. I don't even know if he's going to be a factor for the rotation down the stretch here. But if he's throwing 98 as a starter, throwing, whatever, how many pitches did he throw? Let's look here. He threw uh 75 pitches. Let's trim that down to 20, 25 pitches. Can you touch 100, Suarez? Like if we told you you're only going to pitch every 3 days and throw one inning, maybe he could and he'd be a factor in the bullpen, which that's kind of how bullpens are built sometimes, right? You find these guys, you coach them up a little bit. Maybe they can't make it through an order 2 or 3 times every single time out, but they got nasty stuff and it could be a factor there. But that's for another time. As far as I'm concerned, I just want to see Suarez start another game. My eyes will be glued to the TV and just really, really impressive stuff. Other people to mention: Gunnar Henderson, 2 for 4 in this game. He homered in all 3 games of the series. His OPS for the season rose from 765 before the series to 948, or 949 rather, after the series. And the guy just looks locked in. He's hitting home runs, he's stealing bases, he's playing defense. Like he looks like he's en route for a 30-30 season, which at the shortstop position, atop one of the best lineups in baseball right now, arguably one of the best teams in baseball. That's MVP territory. And I don't, that's kind of what we were expecting. A lot of people were expecting coming into the season. And it's really exciting to just like see it happening because the Orioles, as good as like Rutschman has been, as good as, we've seen guys play in the Orioles uniform recently, they haven't really had a guy doing this type of stuff since Manny Machado. And Manny was, an MVP candidate for the Orioles several years. So it's just sort of in that territory right now. And it's just really impressive. Um, and then the duo of Cano and Kimbrel at the back of the rotation, or at the back of the bullpen, rather. Both of them have ERAs under 2. They also pitched in 3 out of 4 games here. They both pitched in 2 of these Twins games, didn't pitch in the middle game. That was a blowout. And then pitched in the final game of that Milwaukee series. uh, it's interesting. It's not something that Brandon Hyde likes to do. He likes to try to avoid that 3 and 4 situation. I think ideally he wants you to get, a full game in between. And if you pitch twice in a row, then you try to get 2 days off. Like he tries to finesse it that way. I think likely you saw this because they had the off day on Thursday. So there was the ability to sort of massage this a little bit. But we might also not see them available for like this first game in Kansas City potentially because the Royals need to keep them fresh. Um, I think this bullpen is a living, breathing thing that's going to evolve as the season goes on. But right now, Cano and Kimbrel are the guys, and they can't overexpose them or overuse them in the beginning of April. I know the games in April count as much as the ones in September, but you kind of get my meaning there. They got to keep them fresh. So interesting to see what he'll do with them, in this series in Kansas City. And that's all for the games. Really exciting stuff. Obviously, awesome to blow them out in the first 2 games and then to win the nail biter in game 3, especially with Suarez pitching the way he did. Just really exciting stuff all the way around. So, I think these Twins probably aren't a very good team. They've got a lot of injuries right now. But coming into the season, I was, they're in this AL Central, which is a relatively weak division. I thought they would still kind of be, an 85 to 90 win team and make the playoffs. Right now, it's not looking that way. So, I don't want to over analyze here what is potentially a bad team beating a bad team, but in general, still, you got to beat the teams on your schedule. You got to win the games at home. So good to see them get all 3 of the wins there. Moving on to awards, MVP, man, there's just so many candidates here. So I wanted to go to each of them and kind of just show you sort of my thought process here. So Gunner, for those 3 games, I sort of just alluded to it, but in 3 games there, he goes 7 for 13, hits 3 home runs, 5 RBIs, a walk, does strike out 4 times, but that OPS of 1.802, just insane. And that BABIP of 667, really elevated, obviously, but he's just hitting the ball so hard right now. And he's up there with no fear, mashing it, playing like an MVP. So I have him kind of as my top pick for MVP for this series. But I don't want to ignore Jordan Westberg or Cedric Mullins. So Westberg for that same 3 game stretch, if I can get Baseball Reference to work, goes 6 for 11 with the 1 home run, 2 doubles, 4 RBIs, 2 strikeouts, 546 batting average for the series, and a 1,000 slugging. Great series from him as well. He goes not talked about very much, and he's a guy that me personally, my view on him is evolving. I was down on him for last year because I just wasn't super impressed early this year. He was not hitting, but was clutch. And now it's all kind of clicking for him. Just really impressive from Jordan Westberg, playing good defense. Just a really good series, just not quite as otherworldly as Gunnar was. And then Mullins, this is just going to be his game logs from the series. So this wasn't his entire contribution, obviously, but he had the 2 home runs, one of which was the walk-off. Went and only 3 hits in the series, 3 for 12, so not spectacular, but 2 of them were home runs, 5 RBIs, 3 strikeouts, a stolen base, and obviously that ridiculous catch um, in game one, inning one for Cole Irvin. Phenomenal. And his BABIP of just 125, a little unlucky there. So probably hit a little bit better than it showed here. And, fortunately got those 2 home runs to kind of up his value there. But really good from Mullins. And then, of course, Suarez. I don't have anything to look at here on the YouTube video, but Suarez, you saw what he did. Pumping 95, 96, touching 98, baffling major league hitters after not being in the big leagues himself for years. Just so impressive there. But still going to have to give it to Gunnar for his impact across all 3 games, homering in all 3. Just an immense performance from him. And then as far as least valuable player, I think I do have to give it to Jackson Holiday, but it does come with a caveat, of course. So if we look at his 3 games here, it just was not very good. He was 0 for 10 with 5 strikeouts. He did have the 1 walk and scored a run, but just a tough series, right? He's only got 1 hit on the year so far. That came in the final game in Milwaukee. He's gone hitless in 6 of his 7 games. Has only gotten on base twice so far in his big league career, and he's just striking out a lot. He just looks like he's getting overwhelmed right now by big league pitching. But I'm going to preach what I feel like a lot of people are preaching right now, and I'm appreciative of that, is just being patient with him. He's 20 years old. He's just new here, and these struggles are sort of inevitable, I feel like, especially with the not that I only watch Orioles games, but I would say 80% of my baseball watching is the Orioles because it's just between life and work and podcasting. There's only so much time, and I'm going to dedicate most of my baseball watching to the Orioles. All the time, every time the Orioles bring up these young guys anymore, they kind of struggle. We know Gunnar did well at the end of 22, but didn't look great early last year, was walking a ton, was also striking out a ton and just not really putting the ball in play. Adley, he came up in May of 22. That first 2-3 weeks, he was not hitting great. I think his batting was 150 or something like that. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. He wasn't very good. We know Cowser wasn't good last year. Now he's mashing the ball. It's not just now, it's universal. I think people were talking about Cal when he first came up, in whatever that was in the early 80s. He barely hit the ball. It's just this is what happens. This is a different level. And I think the jump from AAA to the big leagues, I think Mike Elias has spoken about it, is just bigger than it's been in a really long time. And you're feeling it with Jackson right now. He's just getting overpowered by everything. He's sort of guessing up there. I will say in game 3, I was watching that game probably the most intimately. He was getting behind in counts, and it wasn't even his fault. The ump was giving the pitcher pitches a couple inches off the plate every time. And then he was kind of, Jackson was shaking his head, and understandably so. It's I can't even catch a break here. I'm struggling as it is, and then you're going to give the guy pitches a ball or two off the plate. What am I supposed to do in the big league level? And you know what? That's unfortunate. That's baseball. He's going to get calls that, he shouldn't get eventually. But, you stick it out. This is the Orioles are, again, they're very deep. They're winning games with him in there. They've won 6 of the 7 games he's played in. They can absorb these sorts of things. That's why Mike Elias staggers these promotions the way he does. It's probably why Holiday didn't make the opening day roster. It's part of why he didn't make the opening day roster along with Colton Cowser is we need these guys to get on track because I can't have 4 rookies in my lineup all hitting up, 040 because they're all seeing big league pitching for the first time in a long time or ever. I can't do it. We need to win games. So Colton, you'll come up. We'll see what you're doing for the first 2 weeks. Oh, you figured it out. Something has clicked. You're a competent, even exemplary major league hitter right now. All right, we've got room now in the lineup for an experiment. We've got room for Jackson Holiday to come up and learn on the job now because we can put him ninth. He's not going to hurt us all that much. Let's see what he can do. And now we're experiencing it. And we're going to see Jackson Holiday. He's going to struggle. If he struggles for too long, yes, they will send him back down. We've seen them do that, not with hitters necessarily. Well, I guess they did with Kowser last year, right? Rodriguez last year, same pedigree as Holiday, former first round pick, top 100, top 20 prospect, whatever. And Rodriguez struggled last year. And they said, we've seen enough of this. You need to go down and figure it out. They'll do the same thing with Holiday. He's only had a week. You know, it's not been good, but he needs to come up here. He needs to figure it out. He needs that experience, and he'll get better. He'll get better. And I did want to also look at his baseball savant because there's things here that he's doing that he's impacting the game in a positive way that don't have to do with his bat. And I think that's important. Okay. So one is his speed. He is, I think, the fastest player on the Orioles right now. I think he is maybe, I'm not sure who, maybe Mateo's faster, but he's right there near the top. And he's in the top 10% of sprint speed in the league. He's legging out these ground outs. He's getting the extra base. He's doing when he's on base, he's getting the extra base. He's doing the sort of hustle things you want to see from a rookie that's trying to figure stuff out. And in the field, it hasn't always been pretty. He's definitely fumbled some stuff out there. It's not always like super clean, but he's getting to everything. His range is already considered elite. Now, defensive metrics take a little bit to kind of reach their equilibrium, so I'm not going to freak out and say he's like a Gold Glover right now at second base. But his speed and his awareness and his baseball IQ is all there. He's getting to the balls. He's making the plays that he needs to. He's doing the things outside the batter's box that I think show he's engaged and still working to figure it out. So look, I'm not going to be the only person out here defending Jackson Holiday. He's far too talented of a player for anybody to be, disappointed in him. Well, you can be disappointed in him, but to give up on him, it's just not going to happen. The Orioles are saying all the right things. He's saying all the right things. And you know what? He sucks right now, but he's not going to suck forever. He's probably not even going to suck a month from now. So just sort of stick it out. And yeah, bad series in a series in which pretty much the rest of the lineup all crushed the ball. So yes, he gets the LVP here, but not because of, a lack of understanding on our part. We know he's just working through some things. So he'll get there. And it'll be exciting to watch. All right, up next for the O's. Let me go to their website here. They have got 3 games on the road in Kansas City, and that starts tonight as I'm recording this, 7:40. Dean Kramer, Alec Marsh on MASN 2. Then on Saturday, they got a 7:10 first pitch. That's the big one. Corbin Burns versus Cole Reagans, 2 Cy Young candidates there. That's one you want to tune into. And then Sunday, the finale, Cole Irvin, Seth Lugo at 2:10 again on MASN 2. So that is all we've got for this episode. I really appreciate you guys all checking it out. I think it was a little bit of a longer one. If you're watching on YouTube, a little bit of a different format. Let me know what you think there down in the comments or via social media at The Warehouse Pod on Twitter and on Threads. Also reach out via email, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. If you're listening via audio, please go over to YouTube, give us a subscribe. I think we'd love to get to 300 by the end of the month. That would be awesome. And if you're on YouTube, head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever it may be, and give us a subscribe there. Free all the way around. If you can give us a rating, 5 stars or a thumbs up or whatever the best possible rating would be, that would be huge. Gets us in front of other Orioles fans, which is what we'd love to do, is just grow the fan base, the listenership, and just enjoy talking about the Orioles together. So that's all I've got for now. Really appreciate you guys listening. And yeah, subscribe, like, follow, all that jazz. And until next time, this has been the Warehouse Podcast, and I'm Tyler. Thanks for listening.